Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for The Voice of Leadership, the show for business executives and global corporations who appreciate a biblical perspective on life and leadership. You are listening to our Fab 500 series featuring some of the best of our 500 episodes and celebrating the 30th year of Trans Leadership Inc. In today's world, not only does a business need to get attention to acquire and retain clients, they also need to use different strategies from 35 years or even 5 years ago. Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for The Voice of Leadership and for Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership, the show for corporate executives who want practical strategies and solutions for building positive and profitable companies that value and develop people. Today's guest has built his own business as well as the businesses of his clients through brand creation and advertising strategies. As a serial entrepreneur, he took many interesting twists and turns to learn the necessary business lessons to get to where he is today. Take the journey with us to leverage his brand creation expertise for your business. So let me tell you about my guest, Barnaby Wynter. He is the founder of the Brand Bucket Company, a UK-based business that serves a broad range of clients from the Fortune 500, the Financial Times Stock Exchange 100, to startups. And as a brand creation expert with over 457 brands to his name, he helps organizations to, as he says, sell more stuff profitably. Barnaby works with C-suite leaders to ensure everything in a business is marketing led. He leads organizations to generate long-term commercial relationships as they define their value proposition, identify their ideal target audience, and build their operations and culture. Previously, and after a fast-track career, he became the youngest managing director of a UK top 200 fully integrated advertising agency in London, where he spent 10 years developing the proprietary Brand Bucket program. He is also the author of Become the Go-To Brand, Mastering Inbound Marketing Strategy, and he's a global public speaker who has spoken to over 17,000 businesses. Married with 3 adult daughters, Barnaby loves to travel abroad, see the UK in his camper van, follow the Chelsea Football Club, and spend time at their converted farm in the Garden of England in Kent. So welcome, Barnaby, to the Voice of Leadership and to Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership.
Dr. Karen, a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me.
I'm so delighted to have you as well. And when I was thinking about the Garden of England, it made me think of the Garden of Eden. That's what it made me think of. I was like, oh, must be a really beautiful place out there. Sounds good anyway.
It is beautiful. It's very green and very verdant and lots of beautiful places.
How fantastic. So let me just start out because I just want to make sure we're on the right track and people understand what we're talking about. So, Barnaby, what's the difference between brand and branding, and how do marketing and advertising fit into the equation?
It's an area where often businesses get very confused. Brand. There is a really big difference. So branding is really the clothes that your business wears. It can be your logo, your look and feel. It can be how you present, how you show up in the marketplace. That's really branding. That's very different to what we describe now as brand. Brand is very difficult to define. And actually, when you talk to people about what a brand is, so we spent many months coming up with the following definition. We define brand as every experience that affects the relationship between a product or service and its buyer. It's key to understand that a brand really only exists in the mind of somebody who's bought from you because they've done something really important and they exchange their most valuable asset that they have available to them, which is time, funnily enough. And time converts into money because you need to earn the money, and you give up your lifetime to earn the money unless you're financially independent. So actually, when you're using money, you're actually giving over time. So when people give time to you as a business, they're really looking for something in return that it's equivalent or at least more than the time it might have taken them to do it, if they could do it at all. And actually, but the key thing about brand today is it's a relationship. And it's a relationship that people value more than they value the relationship with the money in their pocket, which they've taken time to earn. So, of course, the essence of brand is really to create your systems, your processes, everything, every experience around your business, including your people, your culture, everything. All your experiences must be directed to portray a relationship that makes people say, I see why you would be worth more than the money in my pocket. So brand is every experience that affects the relationship between your product or service and the buyer. And that's really a definition of business as much as anything else. It's everything in your business. It's very, very different to branding, which is really just logos and looks and feels and things that designers do and websites and things like that. It's something quite different. How that then relates then to marketing and advertising. So marketing is the discipline of creating every experience that affects the relationship between your product or service and your buyer. That's marketing. Advertising is just one element of relationship building. It's often a big draw on your profit, on your budget. So therefore, of course, it takes a lot of attention in the marketing mix. But actually, everything you do is marketing. The way you show up, the way you answer the phone, the way you dress, the way you manage a warehouse, the way you handle customer calls, the way you take money, all of that is marketing, because everything in that mix affects how people perceive you as a relationship they really want in their lives.
Well, that is really fabulous that you've given us this wonderful definition. And if I was to sort of summarize it, it sounds like the branding part is more cosmetic in a sense, what you see in a more superficial way on the outside. And it sounds like the brand that you're talking about is the internal guts that really define what's the value in the relationship and those experiences. So, do I have that right?
I think you have that spot on. And don't forget, brand exists on the balance sheet. You know, it has a value, whereas a branding doesn't necessarily have a value. I don't think people might mistake the fact that their logo is worth money, but actually it's the people's relationship with the logo that's being valued, not the logo itself. Whereas brand per se can be added into your asset base as a business. Because you could say, look, you're buying our business because we have this relationship with the marketplace. That's what you're selling when you're gaining investment, or you're looking for new staff, or ultimately you're selling the business.
Well, in fact, I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense because if Coca-Cola, for example, did not have the relationships that it has in the marketplace, their logo, we wouldn't care about it. It wouldn't mean anything. It wouldn't have the value that's infused in it because of the relationships that they have in the marketplace. So I think that's really a good picture of it, what you're talking about.
That's absolutely right. And I think the dedication within the Coca-Cola organizations and making sure the relationship always holds true is greatly significant. And actually, Coca-Cola is a great business model because everything's under license, you know, across the globe. So therefore, they've really nailed the systems and processes to make sure that the relationship is always delivered in a consistent way that's consistent with the brand rather than necessarily with the branding.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me ask this because this is a related question. So, what does it mean then to be marketing led, and how does that kind of an orientation produce success?
Well, I think if we go back to the 1700s and the Industrial Revolution, what we saw historically is businesses were being built around systems and processes, but often they were built around scalability, manufacturing. They were built in such a way as that they were designed to make clearly money for the business owners themselves and provide work for people, but to do it in a very systemized way. But the focus was always about building systems that work for expanding the ability of the organization to reach a bigger market. What we've seen, certainly during my career, is a real shift away from that, because what's happened is with the new digital economy, information has moved the power of brand has moved away from the business owners themselves. And now what they need to do is they need to recognize that they build systems and processes that are about their buyers rather than about themselves, and are making it easy to produce things at a cost that people can afford. And still today, I'm walking into big organizations, been around a long time, and they're still more worried about making things easier for them to do business than creating things that are make it easier for their buyers to do business with them. So there's a shift in that. Now, if you ask the FD to do that around your board table, he will look for cost saving exercise, right? And you'll try and do things more efficient. If you ask your operations director, they'll look to do it more efficiently. If you ask your sales director to do that, they'll say, well, we just want a better machine that we can sell more stuff. And it's really only the marketing people around your organization saying, actually, what we need to do is we need to create every element of the system process so it drives the relationship with the buyer. And so therefore, what I've learned over my career is actually you really have to allow marketing thinking to infuse every aspect of your business, from the shop floor, warehouse, right up to boardroom, right out to your web presence, your online presence, your social media presence, all of that. You have to let everything become marketing, the way you box things, the way you package things. And if anybody watching this thinks about their favorite brands, you can't fail to be impressed by an organization like Apple. And if you look at Apple, everything that Apple does, from the way a box opens, is all about you and me. It's not about Apple. And that's why they're so successful. If you look at all of the big brands, if you look at Amazon, Amazon is designed for you and me to make it simple for me. It's not really designed to, and all these successful businesses, if you look at them, they characteristically are focused on the creating systems and processes that are about the buyer, that create amazing relationships. And I'm firmly of the opinion that only the marketing thinkers are able to really sit in the room and say, we could do this and we could change that and everything, and fight the battle that says the relationship, the core of what a brand is about, commercialized relationships, making sure that people really understand that. And therefore, I go into businesses now and make every single aspect of the business marketing led. So that's what I mean by making it marketing led.
So I think one of the huge pieces of what you're talking about is that shift from an internal focus to really the external focus, and recognizing that the value that the organization is bringing is really for that customer or that client who's out there, which means you attend to what's important to them and what's going to give them the experience that you want them to associate with your brand. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely right. And I think that may cost more in terms of effort and thinking and often money. What it creates is a stronger, more bonded, sticky relationship. And therefore, ultimately, you will create a business that is sustainable, can grow from a base. You can sell more stuff to people. You can get them. They'll refer you on to other people in what is a very, very competitive marketplace.
Absolutely. So I know that you have this, I'll say process, I'll call it, and you can correct me, but it's the brand bucket. So what is the brand bucket, and how did you acquire that expertise?
So the brand bucket was originally created to launch a motor vehicle called the Saab 900 back in the mid-80s. And the guy that originated it was commissioned by Saab to find out how people bought motor cars. And he did an 18-month piece of research. And as a result of that, discovered there's 6 steps that people go through when they make a decision to do anything. And in this instance, a decision to buy. And so he then put those 6 steps together and then measured the drop-off rates from those 6 steps, because they drop off. And as a result, consistently, and we've measured this now over the last 35 years, the drop-off rates remain exactly the same. And ultimately, the shape you end up with looks like a bucket. Now, the other fundamental here is, and often you hear the use of the term funnel or sales funnel or marketing funnel, whatever. The problem with that is it has a hole in the bottom. Yeah. So if you take a funnel, there's a funnel, it has a hole in the bottom. This is really part of old school marketing. So the idea is you pour all of your leads in the top and you let the business sort it out, and maybe some flow through the bottom. The problem is that when you pour things at the top, they flow out the bottom and end up on the floor. And so there's always been this argument between marketing and sales. Well, marketing bringing the wrong leads, sales can't convert them, sales bring, whatever. And that's because everybody's using this funnel thinking. Actually, the reason why we use a bucket is because what you want to do is you want to bring people in and you want to keep them in the bottom. And the thing about the sales funnel is nobody takes into account post-purchase. So the key element to the 6 steps is there is a significant proportion of the journey which is post-purchase. And actually, that's when marketing really, really starts to work. So it was originated in 1985. It was used to then create the agency that then I joined to become the youngest MD in 1999. And I then bought that company. Stuart Ball, who's the originator of the brand bucket, decided to retire and sold me the brand bucket and everything it is. And equally, it was a time when the online arena was beginning to bite into the way we do business. So, 2000, 2001, we were starting to see the impact of things like Google and things like that. Very early days. And he just said, look, I'm at the end of my career. You're at the beginning of yours. This is your thing. Take it on. So I bought the whole methodology from him and then spent some 7-8 years creating what we now call the Brand Bucket Program, a process which addresses the fact that we now live in a fundamentally different knowledge economy to the one that was actually even available to us in the late 90s and early 2000s. And it shifted the power base of decision making away from brand owners and now to the buyers. So it's 6 steps that literally take you from being unaware to being a long-term loyalist.
Oh, thank you for describing that. And that's great. I love the fact that the bucket represents keeping those contacts in the bucket and also safely in the bottom of it, so to
Correct.
speak, as where they're not going to be floating out of the top or falling out of the bottom of a funnel. So that's really great. I mean, it's great visual of what it is that you do. So tell us a little bit, maybe give us a couple of case studies, a couple of stories about some clients that you took from A to Z. Let's say when you met them, they were in one condition, and then when you put them through the brand bucket process, they came out in a much better condition. And what was it? And of course, maintain whatever the confidentiality you need to maintain. We're just interested in those elements of the story.
Probably the proudest work I've ever done was I was enabled a leading UK cancer charity, and I apologise if it's a sensitive area to anybody in listening in today or watching in today. Enabled a charity to become a top 10 charity and now a top 5 charity. They sent out a brief that said, we have in our branding, we have a daffodil, and everybody associates that with cancer. They don't associate with our charity. We get involved in patient care right in the last 52 hours of their life, and we replace another charity who have been working with them for the last year called Macmillan. And then people donate money to Macmillan after people have passed away as grateful. But actually, all of the thing they think they're donating to is the nurse that was actually from Marie Curie Cancer Care. So we're just not getting recognised at all in any shape or form. So what do we do? And they sent out a brief, and we responded by saying, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to really understand this is the first fundamental, is what your value proposition is. And so the first part of any brand development process is you must define your value proposition. So the first thing we did is we said, we're going to make the daffodil famous and all that sort of thing. And we won the pitch as a result of that. Some people said they should make the nurses famous. Some people got the wrong brand altogether, etc. And thought it was Marie Curie the scientist, which has nothing to do with them. It was that early on in the internet world. So we created a value proposition, and we discovered that right at the heart of the benefit of having a Marie Curie nurse come and sit with somebody who was in their last 50 years, they not only help people feel comfortable physically, they help people feel comfortable spiritually at the end. But the thing they talked about most of all was the lives of the individual that was about to possibly pass away. And this brought everybody to life, and the family were there, and suddenly Marie Curie nurses help sons tell their mothers they love them and all that sort of thing. Now, this is all very, very emotional. And we ended up with a core value proposition, which was about being devoted to life. And bear in mind, this is a charity that's devoted to helping you, die at the most comfortable death you can. And then suddenly that made sense to the whole of the UK, to a point where actually they started receiving masses of donations because actually what we were able to unearth was the benefit of having American nurses. They were trained to get people talking about the lives of the person who had an amazing life and talk about it. And the stories were unbelievable. There was a story of a lady who was in bed at home. There was a piano in the room, and they said to her, "Do you play the piano?" And she said, "Yes, but I haven't played for years." And she got up and played this beautiful piece of music, climbed back in the bed, and died 2 hours later. And the family were just the letters that were in a box, strangely enough. So the idea was we then made the daffodil famous. So people now wear their daffodils on their lapels, even now after these years, and as a mark of, I'm part of the club. I have a relationship with this charity, and I'm prepared to demonstrate it because I wear what we call a brand property, something that is associated with that business. So that's on the charity side. They are now a top 5 charity. They're doing amazing things. We were able to persuade the government to give them more money so people could pass away at home rather than in hospitals, and because they needed more nurses and they needed to be paid for. And we linked to huge project, 4.5 years. So that's certainly a big thing. Another thing in America, for example, we helped launch FedEx, for example, throughout Europe using the brand bucket. There's a brand property inside the FedEx logo. I don't know if you know it, Doug. The FedEx logo. Yeah. The FedEx logo. Am I allowed to ruin everybody's lives listening in on this? Yeah, and watching this. Yeah. So
Sure. Why? I mean, you're not going to ruin it. It's going to be enlightened.
okay. So the FedEx logo has in the middle of it an arrow.
Mhm.
So there's often when I put this up on when I'm speaking, I say the FedEx logo. What's the brand property? So it's the blue and the orange and stuff, and it's the letters and it's FedEx and all that sort of thing. But actually, if you look into it, it's got an arrow in the middle of it. When FedEx first worked with us and started using the brand bucket, we said, "Oh, what's the arrow about?" And they said, "Well, we're the first organisation to ever have our own air fleet to fly parcels from one side of America to another, and so therefore you can get there absolutely overnight on time, guaranteed." So what we did is we took the arrow and we created a commercial here in the UK with FedEx arrows flying all over the world. So it was literally you could take a parcel and it could get absolutely there overnight, and we made the arrow famous. And that enabled us to launch FedEx throughout Europe way back when, a long time ago, using the brand bucket. Very exciting project. And of course, FedEx is now, a global brand in the same way. Sadly, they kind of forgotten their arrow property because it's the one thing that, is in there. You don't see it so much now. And I think one of the challenges about the industry is it's so branding orientated that it allows the creatives in the industry to come up with these new fandangly ideas that are different and their campaigns and all that sort of thing. And what they do is they lose sight of the value proposition, which was these guys got your parcel there absolutely overnight, anywhere in the world. Follow the arrow. And so that's another great case study that people will relate to. So what you're doing is you're taking the value proposition and discovering what they do, and then you create every experience. And of course, the logo is part of the experience, and the look and feel is part of the experience, and the ideas they're all part of the experience. Of course they are. And in those days, it was very broadcast, which we're not in broadcast anymore. That's a dead duck now from a point of view of marketing in the free world. I think in other cultures, we're still able to use broadcast, but in the free world, it's wherever the internet has a hold, broadcast doesn't really work anymore.
Well, let me comment on these two case examples that you shared, both of them very profound and interesting. And I think I'll start with FedEx because I knew there was something hidden in there. I said it was a word and I couldn't remember what it
Yeah.
was. And so it's the arrow that's hidden. And what's fascinating to me is that if you don't put enough attention on whatever it is that your value proposition is, you could lose sight of it and it could become hidden, not only physically, let's say in the logo, but hidden in terms of how your business operates. And I know over here in the US, as I'll put it this way, a lot of mail delivery services, including FedEx,
Yes.
have actually not delivered on the brand promise. And in a lot of ways, I think we're even pre Pony Express in
Right.
terms of those
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
services and
Yeah.
how the delays are, and a real tendency in today's world not to take responsibility for when it fails to either downgrade the price or to waive it or whatever because it really didn't fulfill the brand promise. Now, if that happens once every blue moon or occasionally, no big deal. However, it happens frequently. And I find that fascinating how people can double down on that brand promise and then forget to live that way. So I think that's an issue.
What always excites me when I get invited into a business is there's always this nugget somewhere sitting in the value proposition that people have forgotten. And then you go, can we polish this off a bit and present it back to the market? And they go, yeah, we could do that. And then you suddenly realize that often the systems and processes are possibly were built to a different agenda, the post-industrial revolution agenda, rather than to the agenda of it's about the people. And couriers are a very interesting area. I've done a couple of couriers in my time. The role of the courier has become a mailman now. Yeah. And what we're all experiencing in those days, we were talking about big parcels going from one company to another, across the States or across the world. Now it's you're ordering at 10 to midnight from an online retailer and expecting it to be delivered the following day. And so that's a whole different logistics operation. And I'm not as convinced that they've really sat down and gone, okay, we need to change our systems and processes. It mirrors the requirement of the market, which we were talking about earlier, rather than how do we adjust the old systems and processes so they kind of work for the new market demand. So it's the wrong way around. We're seeing this a lot. We're seeing this a lot in government. We're seeing it a lot in society. We're seeing it a lot in business. The old ways are creaking at the seams, when it comes to providing the kinds of services and meeting the expectations of relationship building with, pay for homes we live in.
Yeah, I think you're just reminding about the whole purpose of it. It's the relationship building and it's providing that value. And I'm going to come back to this whole issue of what's not working and so on. However, I want to first comment on the charity that you were mentioning. I think that when people die, and we've had a lot of deaths recently,
Yeah.
in the last so many years because of all the things going on health-wise in the world. And so there's a greater frequency when we've had all-cause mortality and so on.
Mm,
And one of the things in the US, for example, that's emerged as a practice is not just the traditional funeral and the mourning part, which is important. There's become much more of an emphasis on the celebration of life. And the
mm,
way you describe that charity, they've really got to that part of being able to tell the life story of these people who were going to be missed and who were leaving, and to celebrate that and to leave important memories, for the family members, like the lady who got up and played the beautiful
yeah.
piano song and so on. And I think that this then is high value because otherwise it's just a sad, sad occasion and nothing to redeem it.
Absolutely right. And in the end, the shifting of energy from one life to another goes through memories, it goes through experiences, it goes through all that sort of thing. That's how human race has passed on the storytelling and all that sort of thing. So I think you're right. I think if we celebrate the story that is a life, that's a much more positive outcome of something that none of us can avoid. There's a no option on this one. And so therefore, the when we did that, the relationship between what is a very, very sensitive area and death and life and raising money, because of course in charities the people who give the money aren't the people who need the money, so you've always got to really find a value proposition that recognizes the reason, the beneficiaries and the people who are the donors. So I've done 30 charities in my career, so because I've got good at doing this, but it's true of a commercial organization. The beneficiaries are the shareholders, and therefore, and the people who buy may have no relationship with the shareholders. You're building a machine that takes value of expertise, skills, groups of people, communities, whatever, and then reframes that so that other people can have a better quality of life.
Yeah, that is phenomenal. And of course, those who are donors, there's something of value that they're signing up for. They want to be a part of creating these kinds of memories and celebrations and relationships for other people. And so you are tapping into that relationship piece, both in terms of the donors and also the recipients, of the service at the same time. So
Absolutely.
this is phenomenal. Great examples, great examples.
Yeah, and from a business point of view, I'm a big Michael Gerber E-Myth fan. You know, businesses are often started by technicians. They've got a great idea that they think is going to really change the world, and they become very feature laden. They focus on the features, making it great. All that. So building the systems process is all about features. But of course, people don't buy features; they buy benefits. And the critical thing is in a value proposition is it's got to be absolutely only about benefits. And a lot of value propositions that I see do not have a benefit laden aspect to them. They're still feature left, and so they look more like mission statements or strategic or positioning statements. They're not really value propositions. And value is critical when you're building a brand, because then you can look at the kind of that central value receptacle and go, right, how do we make all our systems drive the value, our processes drive the value, our people drive the value, and then ultimately how we then convey that value to the marketplace so that people say, do you know what, that's worth me giving you my money for, and ultimately my time.
Hi, this is Dr. Karen dropping into today's show to remind you that one of the most important roles of an executive leader is to quickly make big and right decisions for the business. Are you looking for an experienced and trusted advisor to come alongside you as a thinking partner as you make those decisions? Then contact me at Dr. Dr. Karen, Karen at transleadership.com. Now, back to the show. What you just said right now is pure gold, and I want to double down on it for a second. And that is how that the benefits are more important than the features. So let's break that down a little bit using maybe one of these examples you just shared, the charity or FedEx. Give us a picture, just a brief picture. What would benefits be in the situation and what are features?
I won't use necessarily a case study, but I will explain how you turn a feature into a benefit.
Okay.
So invariably, most people, if they go to their websites or whatever, there'll be a narrative there that is probably about the features. And so the way to turn a feature into a benefit is to use a very, very complicated technique, which I'm going to explain now, right? So please listen because it's very complicated. What you do is you write the feature down and then you write the words, so what, after it. And then you answer that question, right? Now, strangely enough, when you do that, what emerges tends to be more like a benefit than the feature. So let me give you an example of that. You might, so here we go. We've been saying that I have been doing this for 35 years, right? That's a feature, right? So what? Okay, so in the last 35 years, I have worked across almost every sector, every size of business, from startup to Fortune 500. I've seen that every single change that marketing has presented in the last 35 years, I have worked it through. I have understood what the impact is on a business. I've then found the formula for turning that into a successful way for you to build a brand. Right now, that feels like a benefit to a business. Then I've got 35 years experience. So there's an example, and that's a very common example because often people say we've got 60 offices across the globe. What's the benefit of that? What's the benefit of that? The benefit of that is if you've got a product or service that you want to present in the same value proposition, but in an entirely different culture, we've got a group of people who are embedded in that culture who will know how to do that very quickly, very effectively, and start bringing you profits earlier. Okay, there's the benefit of having a global operation, rather than saying we've got 60 offices everywhere. Yeah, big deal. It's the trick is take the feature, put the word so what after it, and then whatever comes next should allude to a benefit. And if it doesn't quite, go so what again. Yeah.
Again, yes.
And then you keep doing it until eventually you go, oh, when I read that, that feels like something I could really do with. And if you got loads of those, then people sit there and go, oh, there's an interesting thing. I could do with all of that. Here's my money.
Well, yeah, I mean, your analysis of that, the example you just used is absolutely perfect. If people don't take anything else away from this conversation, and I know they are going to take away more, that alone is, like I said, that's gold. I mean, that's gold right there. So thank you for sharing that success strategy right there. So you've been alluding to the fact, Barnaby, that in the last 35 years, that business has changed, and what worked years ago is not really what's effective now. And you mentioned broadcasting as one of the things that's kind of on the outs. And I'm even wondering if in the last 4 or 5 years, given everything that's been happening globally with the pandemic and everything else, you have things even changed in that shorter time frame. And what can you tell us about, especially what are some old things that people are still relying on, but they're not effective?
Well, that's such a big question, Dr. Aaron, that I'm going to pick some pieces for that. Right, let me give you two pieces of research-backed information. The first one, E-commerce Foundation, Mary Meekers. Up to 88% of buying decisions start online. Right, so it doesn't matter whether it's business to business or business to consumer or mobile to mobile or whatever you want to call it, they're all the same. And there's another up to 88% of buying decisions start online. So if you think about your behavior when you're going into a buying cycle, the first thing you do is you're thinking, I've got a challenge, a problem, I want to do something different, whatever. What's the first thing you probably do with that? What would you do, Dr. Karen? You probably say, I'm going to go and stay in New York. What would the first thing you do?
If I'm going to buy something?
Yeah, yeah.
If I was in New York,
If you're going to New York, if you're going to New York,
oh, no, I'm going to New York. Okay.
yeah,
I have some favorite stores in New York.
what would you do first?
I'd probably look them up and see
And
what
where
they're
would you
doing.
look them up?
I'd look them up first, probably on my phone in my case. You
Right,
know,
okay. Using what would you use?
I would use there's a feature on my phone where you could just search information. So I
Yeah,
would look those stores up
yeah.
in New York,
Right.
and then I would call them because I know some
Them,
of them
yeah.
have
See
moved
it
and
when
I
they're
don't know where they
open.
are,
Yeah, are they still
you
there?
know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yes,
So,
exactly. That's
so,
what I
so,
would do.
so the research shows that, and it may not, maybe slightly different in America, but people use Google
Yes.
and Amazon. Yeah, so they use a search engine, and you'll talk about using a search engine. You might have a specific app or something like that, but you use a search engine, and you type in what you're looking for. So if you think
Yes.
about that in neuroscience terms, you've already started to build a relationship with the outcome because you thought, I need this, I want that, I've been there before, I've done that, I like that, I wonder if they're still there, I like that particular bagel shop, blah, blah, I wonder if they're still there, I like that hotel with the little window that's over the park, blah, you know all this stuff. So if you think about it, the buying cycle has already commenced, right? I, as a
Yes.
brand owner, don't even know you exist at this stage.
Mhm.
Right. So then you Google me, then you connect me, then you might ring me to see if I'm open, and blah, 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 and everything. And actually, what happens now is the second key fact is when a prospect contacts you for the very first time, they've made 57% of the decision to buy. This is Gartner, used to be CB, Challenger Customer, Challenger Sale, great books, do read them. So what happens is you go through a process of buying until eventually you get to the brand owner and then you say, I'm ready to buy from you. And you're more likely to buy from them, not buy from them. And what most businesses do is they mess it up right then because they say, oh, just to tell you, we've got 60 offices across the world. We've been going for 35 years. We've done 457 brands. And I do all of that on purpose so I can debunk it later on in the call. And 457. And you're sitting there going, I just want to book a room on the 18th of August, right? The little one that looks out over the park. The one where the fruit is on the left-hand table because I prefer that because okay, right. But can we tell you we've got a new restaurant? No, I'm not interested in a restaurant because I'm going to be eating out all of the time because I've got a little bagel shop down the road that actually I love going to and I'm on a particular diet. Whatever, right? Okay, so most businesses mess this up with their website and they make it difficult and they try and sell you stuff and blah, blah. Forget it. I'm in a position where I'm going to buy from you when I contact you for the first time. Now, if you think about this strategically, the fundamentals of marketing broadcast are changed. You see, advertising when I first joined it was about informing the marketplace of new products and amazing things, and shifting the needle to say, if you haven't got one of these, you're going to be left behind. And that's how it was, because the brand owners were kingpin. They were the ones that did the manufacturing and the production, and they had their systems and process, and they were going to make money, and they were going to blast you off the planet with the advertising and all that sort of thing. Today, I Google it, or I go on Amazon, or I go on to any other of the searches and say, I'm looking for something that corner of that room. I need a little shelving thing, blah, blah, blah. And you're doing all of the buying without notifying the brand owner at all. And by the time you contact the brand owner, you're ready to buy, which is why Amazon has got no pretty pictures. You go on it and it's straight into buying. And eBay, no pretty pictures. And PayPal, no pretty pictures. And blah, blah. And, all of this stuff. What's changed today, and I've seen this, is we've moved from a period of what I'm selling through a period in the kind of 95 to 2005, which was all about why you should buy from me rather than from my competitors. Because when the internet suddenly you realize that another thing that is dead, by the way, is the USP, the unique selling point, unique selling proposition. If at any point somebody says, what's your USP, then you can show them the door and say, please return to the previous century. You are not meant to be here, right? Okay, I don't know how you've got here, but go back through the time tunnel and go back to your century. The USP died in 1995 when the internet took a hold, because I can log on, type in your USP, and realize you're one of a million websites that have that USP. I'm not going to go through the million websites and decide whether actually you do have something that's a unique selling point or a unique. You need a unique value proposition. The value proposition is all about value. It's got nothing to do with a selling point. So you're building. So we used to build big advertising campaigns around a USP and shout at people as much as we could afford, right? That's all gone now, right? That doesn't work. It's very expensive. You're wasting most of your money on that. We then went through a period, 95 to 2005, when we were trying to grapple with what the impact is, where suddenly people realized you weren't the only one. Didn't have a USP. And we were using a search engine, and we were browsing and surfing and doing all the things we used to do when the internet came. And then you realize you weren't the only one. So the advertising briefs changed in our agency to why buy from us rather than buy from our competitors. Today, everything that your marketing should be driving is how to buy from yourself, from your business, how to buy. In other words, what you need to do is build a breadcrumb trail that leads to your product or service as the only answer to the breadcrumb trail. So bear in mind, you've got an issue, a challenge, a problem, a service. And this is what we talk about as inbound. So what you've got to create is an inbound journey into your business. And there's a key strategy for that. And that key strategy is to use the knowledge and expertise that you have embedded in your business and help people buy from you. So put your knowledge out there and say, if you're thinking of coming and staying in New York, right, and you particularly like that hotel with a little window overlooking the park, right, with the fruit on the table that's not so far from the bagel shop, what you might not know is there's been a new hotel built that has bigger windows that look at a better part of the park, right, that is actually nearer the bagel shop that you're talking about, and in fact has a bagel shop in it, right? And now you're going, okay, well, I really like that other one, but maybe I should consider that other one. And then you go, and by the way, if you book now, we'll send you a bagel for breakfast, so you can try the bagel before you come to New York. And you go, oh, okay. And suddenly now the relationship between you and that hotel and that park and that window and by the way, we have 24-hour bagel delivery from your favorite bagel shop in the hotel. We'll come and collect it, whatever. And suddenly now the relationship. So by the time you're on to them, you're already saying, can I book that room? Can I book the room? Yeah. And you've abandoned the last hotel that you so love. And that's what you should be doing as a business now, is giving insight into the world that helps people make sense of their buying decision. That's the key strategy that you should be using your expertise. Say, we know everything about this product or sector. If you think you're buying it, you need to consider this, and this. And then if you think of doing that, you should do this. And if you think of doing that, and then eventually people go, do you know what? That kind of makes sense. These guys know what they're talking about. And so therefore I'm going to go and do business with them. And then they'll come, you've created a breadcrumb trail, inbound journey. They've seen you on the social media, they've seen the videos, they've seen the content, they've been on Facebook, they've been on LinkedIn, they've been on Insta, they've been on, all of the things. And then they reach your website. When they reach their website, it says, welcome. How can we help you buy from us? That's what the website does. And then, of course, and this is all the brand bucket at work, by the way. So I'm narrating the 6 steps without having told you what the 6 steps are, of course. But I'm narrating the 6 steps, and eventually, then we make it easy to buy. And then, when you buy from you, you exceed expectation, and you say, by the way, when you arrived at the hotel room, there was already a bagel in your room, right, from your favorite bagel shop, right, that would arrive 15 minutes before you were due to arrive, etc., etc. How cool would all that be? You'd never not go to that hotel again, would you? So anyway.
Well, it's wonderful. I mean, because you're again leading with the
Correct.
benefits to the person who's doing the buying and from
Correct.
their perspective, which means you really have to understand what they want and what they're looking for. And so
Correct.
that's really a great thing. So let me shift gears slightly because I know that you have used even some of these approaches and strategies to build your own business, and that some of the reason you did that is there was some adversity, business adversity that you went through. So tell us a little bit about business adversity that you experienced and what you learned from that and how you applied these strategies even to yourself.
When I was the youngest MD, I was a fancy Dan. Yeah, I was thinking I'm the kingpin. I'm the youngest MD. I've got my own agency. I'm in London, the epicenter, maybe Madison Avenue might compare, but London's the place for advertising and marketing and blah blah. And that's what we like to believe that. And I'm cool. And then the events of September the 11th in New York, of course, changed world order. Most of 60% of our portfolio was out of America at the time, and America just stopped spending with the outside world post that. So we ran into, and then we spent this 7 years developing the marshalling the change that the internet was providing, and the way digital and the way the power-based lift moved from the brand owner and then shouting at people to buyers and prospects, finding the information themselves, making decisions long before they were. So we saw that change in that period. During that period, 50 people, millions of pounds of media spend. I didn't make any money. I was the nature of the advertising model is very tight margins. The margins were probably sitting around 2%, and so you could catch a cold very quickly. I was working 17 and a half hours a day. I was included a commute out from Kent into the centre of London, so that's 3 hours commute each day. So it's 14 hours working, 3 hours commuting. I was working 6 days a week. It was tough. And then I became a professional speaker. I started speaking on platforms, telling everybody what we learned. And then I learned that there was going to be another recession at the end of 2008, 2009. So what I did then is take this fundamental belief that if you turn your systems and processes, so they're all marketing led, actually what you can do is you can run a lean business. It allows you to be much more cost effective, because imagine every single thing you do in your business is going to contribute to a relationship with people who buy from you. Every element of it. There's no aspect of your business, the way you wrap things, the way you parcel things, the way you label things, the way you send your invoices out. Imagine everything that you do. And we've done that. We've done that for our organization. And I suddenly had an epiphany moment where I went, actually, I don't need 6 floors of advertising agency in central London. I can get rid of all that and move the whole thing to the cloud. So I moved the whole thing to the cloud. And now today I've got more people working on my business, but they're all outsourced. They've got their own little agencies, or they're working from home, or they're doing, we post pandemic, everybody's doing hybrid working and all that sort of thing. And I've been running that model now for 13 years. So my cost base has gone down practically to zero. I'm as lean as you can get. But the service I provide is premium service, because we only buy the services we need for the brief we have in front of us. There's no, when I was at Ogilvy, there was a guy that we employed just to polish the rubber plants. He was a Polish guy, and all his job was to walk around the 380 person agency and polish the leaves of the rubber plants, which got dusty, right? And he would polish it, and he just trundled around with his little trolley. That's all he did. Oh my goodness, we have come a long way from having a bloke that polishes the leaves of a rubber plant. And there were literally one. There was probably about 50 or 60 rubber in the building.
That is so funny. I mean, it reminds me of Henry David Thoreau in I guess on Walden Pond or whatever, and he was talking about if you go out in the forest and you bring back a piece of wood or something as a decoration, now you've got to polish it, you got to
No,
dust it, you
exactly,
got to take
exactly.
care of it, and the essence, do you really need it? And that's kind of what the rubber plant example
It
is
was.
about. So I love that.
So what's impacted now is now I dedicate 100% of my time and energies to guiding the organizations that I work with through the process, through the brand bucket program, making sure they define their value proposition, define their ideal prospect, bring those together using the 6 steps of the brand bucket, and ultimately build numbers-led results outcome inbound marketing strategies. So that actually what you're doing is you're driving the numbers at the bottom of the bucket, not at the top. And the broadcast industry was, well, how much money have you got? We'll try and reach as many people as possible and hope they convert. We have an F word in our business and we have a C word in our business, which they are considered swear words. And the C word is customer, consumer, client, probably end user. We're not allowed to use those words in the business at all. So because in neuroscience terms, what happens is your brain reconfigures to assuming you're in a relationship with those people. And from a marketing point of view, you can't afford to do that because you've got to keep thinking, I don't have a relationship with this person. How do I make the relationship better? And putting potential, by the way, in front of it, the brain doesn't understand the word potential. It understands it. So if you say potential customer, that doesn't mean prospect. So we coined a phrase, we talk about paying prospects. So the only difference between the relationship with your buyers is they go from being a prospect to a paying prospect. Now, if you put the term paying prospect into your business, what you will see is a fundamental change of attitude towards people who have bought from you. We all know what after sales means, aftercare means, complaints, blah, blah. But if you say they're actually a prospect, because don't forget, if they're buying from you, they're everybody else's prospect in the market. So they're talking to them as if they're a prospect, and you're talking to them as if they're I'm going to use the C word, customer, client thing. And you ignore them and you put them on the spreadsheet and say, oh, they renew once a year and we won't talk to them, and we'll talk to them 2 days before they do to renew. So they haven't got time to find somebody else. And all this nonsense, right? All this nonsense. Actually, if you treat them as paying prospects, you go, oh, by the way, we've created this amazing makes sense insight for our prospects. We thought you'd like to have it as well because you know what? You're using our product. And in fact, we got it from you in the first place because you told us it. So actually, the relationship changes. I think there's a whole process there. So I've adopted all of that. It's all in my systems and process. I run like a dashboard thing going all the time, all projects. So I go into businesses and I reconfigure them. I define their value proposition. And actually, I can do that without having a whacking great building in central London. Actually, a lot of businesses I work are in shared workspaces and things like that. And I go and spend my time in their offices. So I go and sit in their offices. Of course, with Zoom now, you can do that globally. So, it's
Absolutely.
fantastic.
So this is great work that you've been doing for others and also for yourself. So we see the proof of concept. It works for-profit businesses. It works in charities. It works in entrepreneurial businesses. And you have a book that you've written, Become the Go-To Brand, Mastering Inbound Marketing Strategy, which is what you're talking about. So if someone gets your book, how will their business be improved? What will they learn from your book? And you've been talking about those concepts already.
Yeah, exactly. So what the book is been designed to do. So I have two. The first book was called The Brand Bucket, which is the 6 steps, and it's a detail. And the feedback from the first book was that this is a great what we should do. How do we do it? It's very clever what the Brand Bucket methodology. And so therefore what I've done is I've created a how to do it book. So the Become the Go-To Brand is a how to do book. So what it does is it goes through step by step all of the process, the Brand Bucket process. But then what it does, it tells you how to do it yourself.
Ooh.
Now, you might argue there's a risk with that. If I teach everybody how to do it themselves, nobody would ever give me business. But the one thing, I'm the same as everybody else. We all really only sell time. What I absolutely know is the big corporates, and actually even the smaller ones more so, They don't have time to do what's in the book. So what I'm actually doing is it's absolutely an expression of helping anybody who cares about their brand learn how they should go about building their brand. So I'm teaching them to buy from the marketing industry in the book. And they can either do it themselves or they go, oh, okay, I get what a value proposition has got 4 sets of values, right? Okay, that's interesting. Behavioral, benefits, beliefs, and what they want to be famous for. Okay. And that's all in the book. So it narrates how you do this, what the 6 steps are, how you take the 6 steps into design, and how you take it into strategy, and how you take it into engagement and all that. So it all breaks it all down. And it's kind of, it was really, to be honest, Dr. Carroll, it was an attempt to help all the businesses that can't afford me. Yeah. Because the ones who can afford me are going to go, actually, I can either read the book or just so, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Get Barnaby to do it.
Exactly. Well, and this is wonderful because people have options, they have choices, they can do it themselves, they can do it with you, have you do it for them. I mean, there are a lot of ways
Yeah, of
to
course.
proceed. So it's great
Yeah.
that you're offering those options in the marketplace because different people are looking for one or the other, of those different choices. So how can people reach you, Barnaby? How can they get a hold of you either for some of this advisement work that you do in terms of creating the brand or even for your speaking engagements?
Is there anything you can't get hold of me on? You can get hold of me on LinkedIn. You can visit my website, which is www.thebradbucketcompany.com or barnabywynter.com with a Y, just so you don't get confused. So it's WYNTR. You can find me on Insta. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Google. And you can simply email me, barnaby@thebradbucketcompany.com. Just email me via LinkedIn. I'm open all hours. I do sleep, but I wake up and then I do stuff. I'm very effective, very efficient. I'm one of the few people that has an empty inbox. So there you go. So I file
Oh,
every so it's always
so
empty. I know when you'll come in. If you come in, you'll be there. I'll respond straight away.
well, let's hear the website one more time.
So it's www.barnabywynter.com.
So, what would you like to say in closing here? What additional wisdom would you like to leave for my community of corporate executives?
Brand every experience that affects the relationship between a product or service and its buyer. The relationship is between your value proposition, which is how you define your product or service, and your buyer is your ideal prospect. You need to define that. If you define those two, you will have the 2 fundamental foundation stones for everything you do in your business. I'm a bit biased, so if you can't do everything, just to use those for your marketing, the way you engage the outside world. You can then do that in such a way that is profitable for your buyers, profitable for your people, and profitable for your shareholders.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Barnaby, for being here with me today and sharing such profound wisdom on the subject of brand and marketing. And you're not even in business unless you're doing marketing. So this is a good deal. So thank you so much. We are going to close the show today with a couple verses from Jeremiah, the first chapter, and these will be verses 4 and 5. And when God called Jeremiah to be a prophet, he was young and he even wondered if he could even do the job. And this is what proceeded. He says, Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. And the reason I selected that verse for today is that we are here because we have certain gifts, we have certain abilities, we have a purpose in the world. And when we get in touch with those, leverage that information and lead with the benefits for our paying prospects, that's when things get great. So tune in to what your purpose is, tune in to what your gifts, talents, and special abilities are, and leverage those for multiple benefit all around. See you next time. Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, and today I'm with Pastor Ben Anderson, the Executive Director of the Solid Rock Community Development Corporation. They're doing great work in Southeast Colorado Springs, and today he's going to talk about what they're doing to ensure generational wealth in the community.
Thank you, Dr. Kern. We have purchased commercial property, and the objective is to create generational wealth in families. This property is a tool where residents can invest in the property and then they receive the dividends from it. The dividends are the lease payments that businesses operate in that commercial property. Those dividends can then be passed along to their family, their children, and this is how we create wealth in our communities through property ownership, through commercial ownership, through land ownership. And so we have impacting families in Southeast Colorado Springs.
Thank you so much, Pastor Ben, for what you and your organization are doing to ensure that families thrive for the long haul in multiple generations. And it's also a passive income stream. Isn't that phenomenal? So, you out there listening today, if you'd like to contribute to this great effort, please go to solidrockcdc.com. That's solidrockcdc.com. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. I am also your concierge executive leadership advisor for when you need to make tough business decisions, lead change, create a positive and profitable company culture, develop an enterprise-focused executive team, or prepare for leadership transition and succession. Contact me at Dr. Karen, at transleadership.com. Also go to my website, www.transleadership.com, for more leadership resources. I want to give special thanks to Ron McMillan, gospel jazz saxophonist, National Billboard recording artist, also known as Mr. Sirius XM, for allowing us to use his gifted music on our show, and to Chad Barr of the Chad Barr Group for serving as our show producer. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.